Hello everyone, it is me, the Eternal Ash, and I'm here to ruin your day with a load of Endgame spoilers, so please get out of here if you don't want to hear about Ant-Man dropping his taco. Avengers Endgame was always supposed to be a finale of sorts, and for some major characters, it absolutely was. This was a culmination of a sprawling, interconnected narrative that took 21 movies and 11 years to get through, and it very much marked the end of the first stage of the MCU. But this was also a beginning. Endgame is a crossroads that will reshape the future of the franchise, both on the big screen and on Disney+, and there's a lot of difference to be expected from here on out. On top of that though, there are a lot more characters who could continue on now more than might have been expected before Endgame was released. So the real question at this stage is which of the Endgame characters, and a few missing ones, will return to kickstart Phase 4. Let's start where the MCU did, with the OG Avengers. 34. Nick Fury. Status: alive. He had very little to do in the end for Endgame, but he did return from the dead in the climax and was spotted in the final scenes with the remaining Avengers. Typically, he stood around in the background being all moody without saying anything, confirming that he's still around and he is still a badass, basically. Next up, he is in Spider-Man Far From Home, so we sort of knew he wasn't going anywhere. 33. Professor Hulk. Status: alive. The new and improved Hulk is a joy and, as far as internet kinks go, a proper daddy. The fact that his arc ends with balance and not death is a truly great thing. His new Professor Hulk demeanour was one of the most rewarding parts of the entire film, and were it not for the complexities and the logistics of bringing back to the big screen as a solo concern, you'd have to suspect that we'd have already seen it again. Marvel would be mad not to use him more, but the rights issues might make that impossible. Right now, none of that is really clear, but having a character that notable still around means he has to return at some point. 32. Iron Man. Status: dead. The most devastating and emotionally true moment in any MCU movie, hell, in most comic book movies in actual fact, saw Tony Stark hang up his Iron Man armour the only way he ever could. He became the guy to lay down on the wire, giving his own life to save the universe, which he's been trying to do since way back in the Avengers. And although it hurt desperately, it was absolutely the right thing for Marvel to do. He won't be back. Even with that weird clanging sound effect on the post-credits, Tony Stark is done. 31. Captain America and Peggy Carter. Status: retired and dead. Charged with returning the stones to their correct place in the timeline, Captain America did what pretty much everyone paying attention realised he ought to as soon as time travel was mentioned. He went home. Sure, he returned an old man who could make a decent living from Clint Eastwood impressions, but Steve chose to live his life over again, enjoying what he missed the first time around. Like Tony, his arc ended with the one thing Steve could never get off his mind: Peggy. As for Peggy, we already know that she has died by this point in the timeline, but Steve did still have a full, happy life with her, so there is reason to be cheerful. 30. Black Widow. Status: dead, but coming back. In the film's biggest surprise, Natasha Romanoff became the big casualty of the time heist as she and Hawkeye realised that they had to pay the Soul Stone's price and sacrifice one of them, as Thanos had to do with Gamora. It was an emotionally charged scene, even if it could have done with a bit more weight given to it afterwards, but it actually fit that Widow would choose to sacrifice herself in order to atone for the red in her ledger. She might be dead, but she's got her own movie coming at long last, which will all but confirms that it will indeed be a prequel. 29. Hawkeye/Ronin. Status: retired. For now, having seen his worst nightmare come true, that he'd be unable to protect his own family, Hawkeye turned his back on subscripted superheroism and turned into Ronin, the murderous one-man vengeance machine. There's no real way that matters now, as getting his own family back and Nat's sacrifice will lead to him retiring at peace on his farm. At least until he returns for his limited Hawkeye series on Disney+, in which he will train his new protege, Kate Bishop, to become a second Hawkeye. He's done. He's having a nice time. He's gone. 28. Thor. Status: alive. There is a lot to be said about Thor's portrayal of mental health and the interpretations it offers, but his overruling arc of being himself and unashamed of it, and continuing to kick Thanos' ass while still in dad bod mode, has some serious power behind it. The God of Thunder was a riot for the most of Endgame, and is hugely rewarding to watch. After Thor Ragnarok, we were all primed to expect more for him, but there was also a nagging doubt he'd be killed off to make room for more new heroes. Thankfully, he is still here, and he's still got curves, which I am knee-deep in writing fanfiction for. And even better, it seems he's involved in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is the perfect place for him, as Guardians of the Galaxy. It was right there all along. 27. Star-Lord. Status: alive. Star-Lord didn't die, thankfully, and also got his moment of reunion with Gamora in Endgame, with another payoff of his macho conflict with Thor as an added bonus. A lot of the end was about what comes next for him and his crew in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which will see him and Thor clashing even more if we're lucky. 26. Gamora. Status: currently unknown. While Gamora returned in Endgame, it was the 2014 version who was still allied with Thanos at the outset. She did swap sides, but what happened from that point onwards is a little unclear. There is no sense her going back to her own time, but more likely she's still in the 2023 timeline, but she's gone off on her own because she doesn't yet know herself or the other Guardians at all. That is why she is not with them at the end, and why Guardians Volume 3 could well be about Star-Lord's attempt to find her. 25. Rocket Raccoon. Status: alive. Everyone's favourite Build-A-Bear made it through Endgame as was widely expected. It definitely looked touch and go for a while when he was being crushed in the Avengers facility wreckage, but all's well that ends well, and it ended rather well. He also got a little paternal moment with Groot when he thought he was going to be injured and covered him, which was totally heart-wrenching and wonderful, but crucially, on from that, he lives on and will be back for furries the world over. 24. Groot. Status: alive. Rocket might have thought he was in danger for a while there, but Groot is definitely fine and will be back. Whether that will be as a whiny tree-nager, get it, or not remains to be seen, but he's fine and returns for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. 23. Nebula. Status: alive. The whole issue of your past self being killed and the casualty further down the timeline is a confusing one, but it essentially boils down to this one statement. No matter what, no future is impacted by changes made to the past because, fundamentally, you are always in your own present, even when you're in the past. So basically, it doesn't matter that Nebula's 2014 past is killed because she's in a timeline where she's already lived her past. All crossed eyes and sore heads and waggling arms aside, it just means that she's free to come back in the future in Volume 3. 22. Drax. Status: alive. Drax now has peace, not only because James Gunn is back directing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Dave Bautista can stop fighting Disney on Twitter, but because Thanos is dead and his family has been avenged. That fact made him a little expendable in Endgame, to be honest, but he made it through and will return for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. 21. Mantis. Status: alive. The walking, talking mood ring made it through the second Snappening and somehow through the second Battle of New York, despite having limited obvious fighting prowess. Perhaps she turned some of Thanos' army into emos who simply couldn't function around her, I don't know. She'll be back, either way, she'll be back. 20. Kraglin. Status: unknown. Not even a single solitary moment was given up to explaining where the hell Kraglin went. He wasn't in Infinity War and he wasn't in Endgame, so who even knows whether he's alive or dead? Presumably, if he was snapped away, he's back now, but it doesn't explain where. Hopefully we will see him again, but it is not certain, even though Sean Gunn will probably be the on-set stand-in for Rocket again, so he's around. 19. Scarlet Witch. Status: alive. The badass Scarlet Witch is back, and though she looks somewhat in danger to be permanently retired in the Infinity Saga finale, she made it out alive and got to give Thanos an absolute going over on the way too. She might be done with the movies and the MCU, but she has unfinished business before she hangs up her famous red coat thanks to her Disney Plus show with Vision, which is set in the 1950s. 18. Vision. Status: still dead. Vision's only involvement in Endgame was the one sentence set aside for him when Wanda and Hawkeye discussed those they had lost and their importance in saving the world. Both he and Black Widow gave their lives for the cause, after all. Other than that, he was no more than a footnote hanging over the film, and it is very clear that he is not being revived, at least not conventionally. Still, he is coming back for that WandaVision TV show, which is pretty confusing. 17. War Machine. Status: alive. Though he was probably expendable, Rhodey made it through Endgame to see Tony Stark give up his life to save the universe, adding another emotional beat to that farewell scene. The thing is though, it feels like the Avengers initiative is over, and Rhodey wasn't even a fully fledged member in the wake of Civil War and his injury. could he have been quietly retired? 16. Falcon. Status: alive. Sam Wilson got a couple of brief but brilliant moments in the battle against Thanos' army, but crucially he made it out alive, and his legacy will now be the same as Steve Rogers. The world still needs heroes and America still needs its captain, and Sam is now the appointed replacement for Steve now that he is permanently retired. That suggests his TV show with Bucky on Disney Plus will now be a Captain America legacy show too. 15. Captain Marvel. Status: alive. The most OP character in the entire MCU was a surprise immediate starter in Endgame, considering it looked like a post-credit scene was actually from the movie. And then, even more surprisingly, she basically just left to help the rest of the universe pick up the pieces before coming back with a vengeance for the epic ending. And of course, she didn't die, because she's an Infinity Stone-powered near-god who just made $1 billion at the box office. She's not only covered in a yellow glowing armor, she's also covered in box office armor. And she'll return for some more badassery in Captain Marvel 2. 14. Spider-Man. Status: alive. Spidey sat out most of the movie, but came good for some great moments in the climactic extended battle scene, including getting to play with his instant kill mode. Crucially, he's also one of the pillars of the future of the MCU, and his forthcoming sequel, with all its timeline questions, will close out Phase 3 rather than Endgame, which is very exciting. 13. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Status: alive. Ant-Man was one of the absolute standouts of Endgame, and whilst he didn't go inside anybody's anus, at least not on camera, he was a key player in undoing the snap. Though, he does owe a lot to a rat, to be fair. He also did not die, which is rather wonderful, as it means we can see more of him. As for the Wasp, she was a late-in-the-day extended cameo, but she at least came back to team up with Scott, so their future looks bright at least. Hopefully both will return for an Ant-Man 3-quel, but it is not entirely clear now. 12. Doctor Strange and Wong. Status: alive. The grand orchestrator of the key plot to defeat Thanos was obviously going to survive Endgame because he admitted in Infinity War that he has seen the future where the Avengers were victorious. That confirmed that he would live beyond the victory, since the Ancient One's death ended her ability to see the future beyond it. He did come back and he will return, along with good old Wong, for Doctor Strange 2. 11. Black Panther. Status: alive. Black Panther had the honour of being the first real character to come through Doctor Strange portals and join the battle against Thanos. That was a great moment for fans who had immediately fallen in love with T'Challa, and is definitely one of those air-punching moments. There was never any way he was going to die, but it is good to see him back and safe all the same ahead of his return in Black Panther 2. 10. Thanos and the Black Order. Status: dead. The Infinity Saga had to end with the end of Thanos and his zealous underlings. After all, there was no way he was ever going to see reason, given that the ferocity of his desire to fix the universe was only matched by his megalomania and sociopathy. He was evil incarnate. And no matter how much he protested his fundamental goodness, his story had to be ended in the most brutal way. He and the Black Order, as well as the Outrider and Chitauri army, are done. The MCU has now moved on, and it makes little sense that we'd ever see any of them ever again, apart from the vague chance that Cull Obsidian turns up in a Captain Marvel sequel to explain why he's wearing her colours on a swatch on his weapon in Infinity War, of course. Probably not though. 9. Loki. Status: dead, but coming back. Loki's death wasn't undone by Endgame, but there was that curious moment where he disappeared from S.H.I.E.L.D's custody when Captain America, Iron Man and Ant-Man messed up the Tesseract heist. And that escape, which changes the timeline that Loki's on, and presumably means he can't now be killed in his immediate future, because Thanos is also killed before they meet once more, means we're going to see him once again. This could have been an opportunity to retire him entirely, but Tom Hiddleston is coming back thanks to his Disney Plus show. 8. Bucky. Status: alive. Having been the first character to be dusted in Infinity War, and with his story arc basically wrapped up with his deprogramming in Wakanda, it looked like Bucky might be in peril of retirement. But then it was announced he would be back for a Disney Plus show, and it was obvious he couldn't be going anywhere. In the end, he survived the battle, and he is back for his TV show with Sam Wilson coming soon. 7. Shuri, Okoye, M'Baku and Ramonda. Status: alive. When Black Panther walked back into Endgame, he came with his family and all of the Wakandan people for the big show. None of them were ever going to fall permanently because they're only just at the very start of their stories, and their sequel is coming pretty soon too. Presumably Nakia and W'Kabi are both alive too, but neither appeared in Endgame or Infinity War. W'Kabi is presumably still locked away and living in fear of his wife, while Nakia will probably be back for Black Panther 2. 6. Jane Foster and Eric Selvig. Status alive. The side characters from the Thor movies were important previously to explaining the scientific holes in the franchise, but they ran out of usefulness in Phase 2 and both were quietly retired at different times. Natalie Portman's Jane returned here for a redo of her Thor: The Dark World scenes, but the footage was old and the only thing Portman added was a little voiceover to be used in the distance. Beyond that, she shot nothing new, and nor did Stellan Skarsgård, who Eric Selvig was a notable absentee other than in the rundown of casualties at the start. Consider them both retired. 5. Korg and Meek. Status alive. Trust the two former Sakaran gladiators to steal the show with their Fortnite/Dad Bod Thor sequence. They weren't involved for too long, though they did turn up briefly in the final fight, but there is so much goodwill for them that they surely have to reappear. Give us a TV show or give us death. 4. Valkyrie. Status alive. All hail the new King of Asgard. After standing in for the absentee, abs-free Thor in Endgame in New Asgard, Valkyrie, who presumably must have found her way back to Thor with the other survivors during the 5-year time jump, gets given the throne permanently at the end of the movie. Let's hope that we either get a Siege event off the back of this or the female Avengers movie that Tessa Thompson pitched to Kevin Feige. That would be good. That'd be very good. 3. Pepper Potts and Morgan. Status alive. And probably done. Having watched her beloved die to save the universe, Pepper Potts will never be the same again. But she has Morgan with her and they now have a life of safety thanks to Tony. There is no way she'll pull on that rescue armor again though. Not when Tony's whole arc was about them both wanting to give up being Iron Man and him never quite being able to. Expect Rescue, as cool as she was, to stay in the garage now and not return. 2. Harley Keener. Status alive. Somehow, everyone seems to have missed the point a while back when Ty Simpkins' Endgame casting was confirmed by IMDb, because his appearance at Tony's funeral service came as a massive shock to a lot of people. Not least because Simpkins now looks absolutely nothing like he did in Iron Man 3. There was some suggestion that he had been cast as a potential replacement for Iron Man, but that is unlikely. And even with that weird sound effect stinger after the credits, it definitely feels like he was only brought in as an Easter egg and he has no future. 1. The Ancient One. Status dead. While time means nothing to the Ancient One and the writers of Endgame, am I right guys? Her death is a fixed point that she cannot advance beyond. So even though she appears in Endgame, it is before her death in a time travelling sequence and that's the end of her. Her death in Doctor Strange is still a death in this timeline, unfortunately, so don't expect to see her again. And that is just about everyone. What did you think of Avengers Endgame? Share your reactions in the comment thread below. I've been Ash and this has been What Culture, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.